The last time I saw my grandfather alive, he was working in his private lab, surrounded by circuits and prototype boards, his white hair wild as Einstein's. "Alex," he'd said, looking up from his work with those sharp blue eyes that could pierce right through you. "Remember what I always tell you. Innovation isn't about being first," I recited, smiling at our familiar exchange. "It's about being right." And he prompted, setting down his soldering iron. "The most valuable things aren't always visible on the balance sheet." He nodded, satisfied. "Good boy. Now hand me that oscilloscope, would you?" I was 28 then, fresh out of my PhD program in electrical engineering, working as a junior researcher at Quantum Tech, the company my grandfather had built from nothing into a billion-dollar technology empire. Everyone expected me to start at the top, but Grandpa insisted I begin in R&D just like he had 40 years ago. "You need to understand how things work from the ground up," he'd said when I protested. "Your uncle never did, and look how that turned out." Uncle Richard, my father's older brother, was CFO of Quantum Tech, but everyone knew he was just a figurehead. He had the family name but none of the technical brilliance that had made my grandfather successful. Dad might have been better suited for leadership, but he died in a climbing accident when I was 12, leaving me to be raised by my mother and grandfather. I didn't know it then, but that conversation in the lab would be our last. 2 weeks later, Grandpa Arthur Mitchell, founder and CEO of Quantum Tech, was found dead in his office. Heart attack, the doctors said. Natural causes. He was 78. The funeral was exactly as he would have hated it, formal, stuffy, full of corporate types more interested in the future of the company than in mourning its founder. Uncle Richard worked the crowd like a politician, shaking hands and accepting condolences with practiced grace. His wife Amanda hung on his arm, her designer black dress probably worth more than my yearly salary. "Such a tragedy," I overheard her telling someone. "But Richard is ready to step up. The company needs strong leadership now." I stood in the back, uncomfortable in my dark suit, missing the casual conversations Grandpa and I used to have over circuit boards and coffee. My mother squeezed my hand, understanding as always. "He was so proud of you," she whispered. "Never forget that." The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday at the corporate headquarters. I arrived early, passing through the familiar security checkpoints, nodding to researchers I knew from the labs. The company's legal team had arranged everything in the main conference room, all sleek glass and chrome, with views of the city skyline that Grandpa had always said reminded him how far he'd come from his garage startup days. Uncle Richard was already there, naturally, seated at the head of the table where Grandpa used to sit. Amanda perched beside him, tapping away on her phone. A few board members filled other seats, along with key executives and legal representatives. "Ah, Alex," Uncle Richard said as I entered, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Good of you to join us. How are things in the research department? Still playing with your little circuits?" Before I could respond, Harrison Webb, the head of legal, called the meeting to order. "We're here for the reading of Arthur Mitchell's last will and testament," he began formally. Mr. Mitchell was very specific about his wishes. I tried to focus on Harrison's words, but my mind kept drifting to my last conversation with Grandpa. There had been something urgent in his manner that day, something he seemed to want to tell me. But we'd been interrupted by an emergency in one of the production facilities, and he'd never finish whatever he was trying to say. And to my grandson, Alexander James Mitchell. My head snapped up at the sound of my name. Uncle Richard had gone very still. "I leave controlling interest in Quantum Tech, including all voting shares, patents, and associated intellectual property. Additionally, Alex will assume the position of CEO, effective immediately upon the reading of this will." The room erupted in chaos. Uncle Richard's face turned an alarming shade of purple. Amanda's phone clattered to the floor. Board members started whispering furiously among themselves. "This is ridiculous." Uncle Richard slammed his hand on the table. "I'm the CFO. I've been running this company's finances for 20 years, and you're telling me Arthur left everything to this lab rat?" "Richard," Harrison said calmly, "there's more." But Uncle Richard was on his feet now, pacing like a caged animal. "He's not even 30. He has no business experience. He spends all his time tinkering in the basement labs like some overgrown science fair kid." "Just like your father did," my mother's quiet voice cut through his tirade. She'd slipped into the room unnoticed during the commotion. "Or have you forgotten how Quantum Tech started?" "That was different," Richard snapped. The industry was different. We need real leadership now, not some idealistic researcher who thinks he can follow in Arthur's footsteps. Mr. Webb, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the shock still reverberating through my system. You said there was more. Harrison nodded, shuffling his papers. Yes. There's a letter, to be read only in the presence of Alex and the board members. He glanced meaningfully at Amanda, who remained stubbornly in her seat. Private board members only, Harrison clarified. Amanda gathered her things and stormed out, shooting me a venomous look as she went. Once the room had cleared except for board members, Harrison opened a sealed envelope. The paper inside was covered in Grandpa's distinctive scrawl, not typed and formal like the will, but handwritten with the urgency I'd sensed in our last conversation. To the board of directors and my grandson Alex. Harrison read. If you're hearing this, then I ran out of time to tell you in person. Quantum tech is on the verge of something revolutionary. The work we've been doing in Lab Zero. Lab Zero? One of the board members interrupted. There is no Lab Zero. Oh, but there is, Harrison continued reading. Hidden beneath the main research facility. Only Alex and I knew about it. Inside, you'll find a future of quantum computing. A breakthrough that will change everything. But there are people who would kill for this technology, including some very close to home. The lab is secured with biometric locks keyed to Mitchell DNA. Alex, you'll know what to do when you see it. Trust no one until you understand everything. And Richard. Harrison paused, looking uncomfortable. What? Uncle Richard demanded. What did he say about me? I know what you've been planning with Global Tech. I have proof. Alex checked the safe in my private lab. The password is your father's birthday. The room fell silent. Global Tech was our biggest competitor, a tech giant that had been trying to acquire quantum tech for years. Any dealings with them would be a massive breach of corporate trust. This is insane, Uncle Richard said, but his voice had lost its anger, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. Arthur was clearly losing his mind at the end. Hidden labs. Corporate espionage. He was paranoid. Nevertheless, Harrison said, these are his legal wishes. Alex is CEO, effective immediately. And given the serious nature of these allegations, I recommend a full audit of all executive communications and financial transactions. Uncle Richard stormed out of the room, nearly bowling over an assistant in his haste. The board members gathered their things, some offering me congratulations, others looking skeptical. Soon only Harrison, my mother, and I remained. Alex, Harrison said quietly, your grandfather added something else, for your eyes only. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper with just one line. The quantum key is in the music box. Be careful who you trust. The music box. I knew exactly which one he meant. A handmade wooden box that had sat on his desk for as long as I could remember. It played our favorite backed piece, the one he taught me to play on piano when I was young. I need to get to his private lab, I said, standing. Now. But as I would soon discover, I wasn't the only one with that idea. The security logs would later show that Uncle Richard had accessed the lab just minutes after leaving the conference room. What they wouldn't show was what he took, or what he was planning to do with it. My grandfather's private lab was exactly as I remembered it from our last conversation. Organized chaos of circuit boards, testing equipment, and handwritten notes in his distinctive scrawl. Except for one thing, the music box was missing from his desk. Someone's been here, I said, noting the disturbed dust pattern where the box should have been. Recently. Harrison Webb, who had insisted on accompanying me, pulled out his phone. I'll check the security logs. Yes, Richard accessed the lab 12 minutes after leaving the meeting. My heart raced as I approached the wall safe hidden behind a vintage vacuum tube diagram. One of Grandpa's favorite pieces of scientific history. The combination was indeed my father's birthday, 03 to 1772. Inside, I found a thick folder labeled Global Tech and a tablet computer I'd never seen before. The folder contained emails, financial records, and photographs that made my blood run cold. Uncle Richard had been secretly meeting with Global Tech executives for months, providing them with confidential quantum tech research data. But it was the tablet that held the real bombshell. These are security recordings, Harrison observed as I swiped through the files, from cameras I didn't know existed. The footage showed Uncle Richard in numerous clandestine meetings, not just with Global Tech executives, but with people I recognized from our own board. He was planning a hostile takeover, one that would have stripped Grandpa of control over his own company. That's why he changed the will, I murmured. Grandpa found out about the conspiracy. But where was the music box? And what was this quantum key Grandpa had mentioned? A commotion outside the lab drew our attention. Through the glass walls, I could see security guards rushing toward the research wing. My phone buzzed with an alert. Unauthorized access attempted in sub-level B. Sub-level B doesn't exist, Harrison said, frowning at his phone. I smiled grimly. Yes, it does. Lab 0. The hidden lab's entrance was exactly where I'd expected, behind a seemingly solid wall in the basement level, accessible only through a biometric scanner disguised as a circuit breaker panel. As Harrison and I descended the stark white staircase, accompanied by 2 security guards, I could hear voices echoing from below. It has to be here somewhere. Uncle Richard's voice, tight with desperation. Search everything. We emerged into a vast laboratory space that would have made any tech company jealous. Quantum computing arrays lined the walls, their cooling systems humming quietly. In the center of the room stood Uncle Richard, the missing music box in his hands, surrounded by 3 men I recognized from Global Tech's executive team. It's over, Richard, I called out, making them all jump. Step away from the equipment. Alex, he tried to hide the music box behind his back, like a child caught stealing cookies. I can explain. I'm protecting the company's interests. These men are here to steal our quantum computing breakthrough, I interrupted, just like you've been stealing our other research. One of the Global Tech executives started edging toward the exit, but the security guards blocked his path. You don't understand, Richard snarled. This company needs real leadership, not some idealistic kid playing scientist. I've spent 20 years making backdoor deals and selling our technology to competitors. I pulled out my phone and played one of the security recordings. Richard's face went pale as his own voice filled the lab, discussing pricing for stolen trade secrets. Where did you get that? Grandpa wasn't as oblivious as you thought. He knew what you were planning. That's why he made sure everything was documented. Richard's expression shifted from shock to calculation. Fine. Let's make a deal. You're young. You don't want the burden of running a company this size. Global Tech is prepared to offer. Put down the music box, I said quietly, before I show the board what else is on this tablet. His hands tightened on the wooden box. This is nothing but a sentimental trinket. But if you think it's so important, he held it over the edge of a nearby workbench. Maybe we should negotiate. I smiled. Go ahead. Drop it. Something in my tone made him hesitate. What do you mean? The quantum key isn't in the music box, Uncle Richard. That was just Grandpa's way of identifying who we couldn't trust. The real breakthrough. I gestured to the quantum arrays humming around us. It's already integrated into every system in this lab. Has been for months. You're bluffing, one of the Global Tech executives said. Our sources say the technology isn't operational yet. Your sources, I said, walking over to a terminal, were as reliable as your ethics. I typed in a command and the screens around the lab lit up with a familiar back melody translated into quantum algorithms. Grandpa and I completed the final tests 3 weeks ago. The patent applications were filed the next day. Richard's face contorted with rage. He hurled the music box at my head, but one of the security guards caught it mid-air. Within minutes, the lab was swarming with police and FBI agents. Harrison had quietly called them while I was keeping everyone distracted. You'll regret this, Richard spat as he was led away in handcuffs. You're nothing but a lab rat playing at being CEO. I picked up the music box, miraculously unharmed. No, Uncle Richard. I'm exactly what Grandpa knew I could be. Someone who understands that real innovation isn't about being first, it's about being right. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, press conferences, and corporate restructuring. The evidence against Richard and his conspirators was overwhelming. The board, once they saw the security footage and financial records, voted unanimously to support my leadership. Quantum Tech stock actually rose when the news broke. The market apparently appreciated a CEO who could protect corporate secrets and innovate at the same time. The quantum computing breakthrough, when we officially announced it, exceeded even our most optimistic projections. 1 month after the confrontation in Lab 0, I sat in what was now my office, the music box restored to its place on the desk. My mother had just left after helping me hang a new piece of art. The vintage vacuum tube diagram that had hidden Grandpa's safe, now framed and mounted where I could see it every day. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Dr. Chin, one of our senior researchers, practically bouncing with excitement. Alex, the quantum network test results, they're even better than we predicted. Your grandfather's theories about quantum entanglement were spot on. I smiled, remembering all those late nights in the lab with Grandpa, discussing theories that seemed impossible then. Show me, I said, following her toward the research wing. As we walked, we passed the wall of CEO portraits. Grandpa's photo was there now, right next to where mine would eventually hang. His eyes seemed to twinkle with that familiar mix of mischief and brilliance. Innovation isn't about being first, I whispered. It's about being right. And somewhere I was sure Grandpa was smiling. In the months that followed, quantum tech flourished under the new direction. We expanded the research division, established a foundation to support young scientists, and created a mentorship program that would have made Grandpa proud. Uncle Richard and his co-conspirators faced federal charges for corporate espionage and fraud. The music box still sits on my desk, playing Batch whenever I need inspiration. Inside, where Richard never thought to look, is an old photograph of Grandpa and me in his original garage lab. Both of us covered in solder burns and grinning like mad scientists. On the back, in his handwriting, is the real key to everything. The most valuable things aren't always visible on the balance sheet: love, trust, and the courage to do what's right. Never forget where we came from, and never stop looking toward where we're going. Love, Grandpa. Sometimes, late at night when I'm working in Lab Zero, I swear I can feel his presence in the hum of the quantum arrays, in the elegant dance of electrons and algorithms, in the endless possibility of discovery. And I know that while Richard saw only dollar signs and corporate power, Grandpa saw something far more valuable: the future and someone he trusted to guide it. Innovation isn't about being first, it's about being right. And sometimes being right means honoring the past while building the future, one quantum bit at a time.